G'day, g'day! Welcome to my first time doing a room tour. I guess we can call this your first Woody walkthrough. Like most husbands I know, their man caves are in the basement. And guess what? Mine isn't any different. So come on down the stairs with me, and let's get this party started. Why don't you grab a mug of your favorite conversation lubrication, sit in a comfy chair, and relax while this crazy ginger tells you a tale or two about Woody's Nerd Cave. Going back a couple of years ago, right after the Super Bowl, I was looking around the man cave thinking, man, this room is really boring. The man cave looked nothing like it does now. There was still a beautiful entertainment unit with a huge widescreen TV. I had a couple of couches to crash on, so this was a good place to watch sports, movies, or listen to some music. The back part of the room was nothing but gym equipment. Unused, smelly gym equipment. So, once I was granted permission, I dedicated myself to redecorating the man cave. My original intentions to make my man cave into Woody's Nerd Cave became crystal clear when I discovered I had two ideas. One, I wanted anyone who knows me to come into the Nerd Cave and think to themselves, yup, this is Woody. And two, I wanted to make a place where I could disappear into from the realities of the world and surround myself with the things that interest me. Those interests I love are sports, reading, especially books about history, cars, movies, music, and Marvel Comics. These are the things I wanted to fill up the room with to become my Nerd Cave. What we've just seen is the front of the room called the entertainment section. This is the place in the house where we go to watch movies, sports, listen to music, where I neck on the couch with my wife, read comics and history books. The back of the room is called the Marvel section. In this section, the walls have been decorated with posters of superheroes and villains painted by the magnificent artist Alex Ross. Around a decade ago, I picked up the graphic novel titled Marvels by the writer Kurt Busiek, and Alex was the artist. Upon first looking at Alex's art, I fell in love immediately. You see, Alex uses watercolors and other techniques other than conventional methods to create his work. Apparently, Marvel loved his work too, as they commissioned him to paint a life-sized wall mural of some of their popular superheroes in the reception area of their head office in Manhattan. I bought a replica knowing it would fit perfectly into the Nerd Cave. What is contained within the bookcases are over 50 years of collecting and reading Marvel Comics since 1972. Man, these comics have thrilled me so much. I hold Marvel responsible for my crazy imagination. By tapping into that imagination, I was able to create this Nerd Cave. On my superhero wall, I discovered it extremely peculiar that the superheroes Marvel commissioned Alex to paint were those same superheroes I followed as far back as the early 70s. The lone survivor of the Nerd Cave redecoration project is the die-cast metal car case. Inside this case are beautiful cars from movies, TV, and some are from sports. I specifically created 7 displays filled with Marvel characters, and each has an exclusive story behind it. Each one has its own concept and meaning, and this crazy ginger is going to explain each one of them. So, if you want to, now's the time to take another sip, or if you have to, fill up the mug again. We're going to go for a ride through the Marvel section of the Nerd Cave. Well, if I'm going to start displaying Marvel characters, I might as well start off with their most popular, the Amazing Spider-Man. I call this display Stan Lee and His Marvelous Friends, and it's my tribute to the history of Marvel Comics. In this diorama, I collected some Hasbro Marvel Legends, some Toy Biz Marvel Legends, and some Disney Diamond Marvel Select action figures for the characters. The diorama is provided by Vertigo-Toys. Alright folks, I'm going to get all Dr. Phil on you here. I'm a history nut, a psycho. I've been a history nut my whole life. You know who I got to blame for that? Marvel Comics. You see, back in the early 70s when I was a kid and I was reading the news stories from Marvel Comics, they were also reissuing some of their back issue comics from the 1960s. I was getting a double dose of Marvel Comics all at the same time, the new and the old. I was discovering who they were and how they became. So, for this diorama, I collected some of Marvel's greatest creations from the 40s all the way to the 70s that have left a big impact on me. And I had them surround Stan Lee and pose for a picture by none other than the great photographer for Marvel, Peter Parker, also known as the Spider-Man. I just love a superhero versus superhero battle. It is my most favorite comic. In this display, I collected some Hasbro Marvel Legends, some Toy Biz Marvel Legends, and some Diamond Marvel Select action figures for the characters. The building is provided by NECA and it's a Street Originals. The backdrop is provided by Extreme Sets and it's a Deranged Alley. Superhero versus superhero. Who's gonna win? Who's gonna lose? Can a superhero lose? You see what I mean? It's one of my most favorite comics of all. Back in '73, my family took a 3-day road trip to Prince Edward Island. I bought some comics for the car. At the same time, Marvel was issuing out their Avengers vs. Defenders war. For 3 whole days in the back of that car, I read nothing but Marvel All-Stars fighting Marvel All-Stars. It was a magnificent epic. When my family reached Prince Edward Island, the very first thing they did was go see the ocean. Not me. I went to the store. I had to figure out how this war ended. So for this diorama, I pay tribute to the Avengers vs. Defenders war and all those comics I read when I was a 10-year-old on the way to Prince Edward Island. So I love a superhero versus superhero story, right? Well, I might as well pay tribute to the best superhero versus superhero comic I have ever read, World War Hulk. For this diorama, I collected some Hasbro Marvel Legends, some Toy Biz Marvel Legends, and some Diamond Marvel Select action figures for the characters. The display is an Extreme Sets Arena 3.0 diorama. The final battle of World War Hulk took place inside Madison Square Garden. For my diorama, I wanted an arena with an octagon in it. And inside that octagon, I wanted to contain some of old Greenskin's oldest adversaries he's faced in comics ever since the early 60s. And I also wanted to include Spider-Man. And Spider-Man had to be in his black symbiote costume. And the reason why was because I wanted to represent one of the most significant changes that occurred in Marvel, Spidey's costume change. For this diorama, for the participants, I collected some of Marvel's super heavyweights, those that have faced off against old Greenskin, and maybe some who haven't faced off, but I thought would probably give him a great battle anyway. This is my tribute to World War Hulk. Well, there ain't no use in avoiding the big, huge purple and blue elephant in the room anymore. Hasbro's Marvel Legends Haslab Galactus. Over 30 inches of an action figure. Perhaps the best product they've made. It's almost as tall as my wife. I also collected some Hasbro Marvel Legend action figures to be the characters in this display. Because of the ginormous size of Galactus, I couldn't buy a diorama, nor could I make one. So instead, I purchased some Tamashii Nation special effects. For the largest display, I pay homage to the largest co-creator in the Marvel Universe, Jack the King Kirby. With my mug in my hand, I raise it up to the air, and I toast the King and his majestic pen, for without it, we wouldn't have a Cap, Fantastic Four, Hulk, Thor, Avengers, X-Men, and hundreds of others, including villains. Simply, the Marvel Universe that we know of it as today would not exist if it wasn't for Jack. So, for the largest character goes the largest tribute. Thanks, Jack. Well, with the mug still up in the air, and I'm giving out the thanks, I might as well say thanks to Marvel for bringing the world's most popular superhero team to my homeland. For this, I collected some Hasbro Marvel Legends, some Toy Biz Marvel Legends, and some Diamond Select Marvel Select action figures for the characters. The dioramas in Extreme Sets J-806M. I'll confess to you, when I started watching Marvel and I was reading their comics, the X-Men were not a big deal back then. But that all changed by the mid-70s when a writer with Chris Claremont teamed up with an artist from Canada by the name of John Byrne and an inker, Terry Austin, and created some phenomenal X-Men stories that still resound to today. One of those issues had the X-Men come up to Canada, my homeland, to face off against Marvel's first ever superhero team. Foreign superhero team, that is, the Alpha Flight, for the custody of Wolverine. And speaking of flagships for Marvel Comics, we got Spidey, the Hulk, and Wolverine, and he's Canadian. Man, I can't tell you what a kick it was back in the 70s knowing that there was somebody in the Marvel bullpen that was thinking of my homeland and writing comics. Well, if we're going to be drinking, we might as well drink over Marvel Cosmic events, because these ones are usually doozies. I find it really funny that back in the 60s when Marvel first became popular, they were grounded in things like pop culture and realism. But that all changed when they looked to the outer space and they created the Marvel Cosmic events. With stories like Galactus, The Secret Wars, Annihilation, King in Black, Kree Skrull Wars, Secret Invasions, Marvel brought their true power on page, and Marvel Cosmic events were unlike anything in comics. They were not only a threat to Earth, these cosmic events were a threat to the whole galaxy, and they usually contain one hell of a nefarious villain. So for this diorama, I collected some Hasbro Marvel Legends, some Diamond Marvel Select, and some Toy Biz Marvel Legends action figures for the characters. The diorama is an Extreme Set, Sector 07. This is my tribute to Marvel Cosmic events. Perhaps maybe some of the best stories comics has ever had. I'm calling this one Heroes Don't Have Names. In this display, I collected Hasbro Marvel Legends, Dolliver's Action Force, and Diamond Marvel Select action figures for the characters. The diorama is an Extreme Sets rooftop with a Vertigo-Toys backdrop diorama. Heroes Don't Have Names. I pay tribute to all of the great artists that have ever worked for Marvel. With their glorious art, they have turned me into a fan for my life. From the 1960s, with some names that may have been forgotten, but not by me. Steve Ditko, Don Heck, John Romita Sr., Herb Trimpe, Gene Colan, George Tuska, Neil Adams, Jim Steranko, who went on to inspire some great artists from the 70s like George Perez, John Byrne, Frank Miller, and my favorite of all are the brothers John and Sal Buscema, who during the Bronze and Silver Age created some of the greatest art I have ever seen. These people went on to lay the groundwork for some of the most incredible art that is being produced by Marvel today. Without these heroes, some of them without names, Marvel just would not be what it is today. The formula in comics is pretty easy. You ain't got a superhero without a supervillain. It doesn't matter how popular the superhero is. It's always going to be based on how great the supervillains are. For this diorama, I collected over 200 Hasbro Marvel Legends, Diamond Marvel Select, and Hasbro Marvel Universe action figures for the characters. It's simple. Supervillains are the main principles responsible for the popularity of Marvel Comics. Now, before you start thinking that I am some sort of Jeffrey Dahmer or Charles Manson evil persona, I wanted to defer to Stan Lee on his thoughts on villains first. Stan once said, superheroes are very boring after their origins, but supervillains? They're interesting their whole careers. And Stan should know. Stan went on to co-create some of the greatest Marvel supervillains. So with so many action figures contained in one diorama, I had to be able to distribute these guys evenly so it didn't look like they were all posed for a mugshot. So, what I did here in the center section was I collected those supervillains that were created between 61 and 67 that posed such a significant threat to the popular superheroes of the time. For this side of the diorama, the categories of characters that I wanted to collect are vast. I wanted to collect some androids and robots from the future, from the present, even from outer space. I wanted to be able to collect a mad titan dictator. I wanted to also have supervillains that have either animals in their names or they have an animal-like power. I also wanted to collect some of those supervillains that use their brains instead of muscles. And I wanted to collect some of the members of the most sinister groups, evil groups that have ever existed in Marvel Comics. Groups like the Masters of Evil, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, the Sinister Six, the Wrecking Crew. Heck, I even got members of the Syndicate involved on this side. To include with this group of muscles and brains, I also wanted to collect members of the various armies that have been involved in Marvel Comics. AIM, Hydra, Ninja Soldiers, Hellfire Goons. Heck, I even still had villains with animals in their names on this side too as well. And they're all being led by that evil mutant Onslaught. Caution, do not enter. Peter, damn it all, why didn't you read the damn sign? So for this side of the plateau, I wanted to collect some femme fatales, some of the most dangerous females in Marvel Comics. I wanted to collect some of those supervillains that use weapons to get their dirty deeds done. I wanted to collect some frequent flyers. And I also wanted to collect those beings that have the ability to manipulate matter. So on this diorama, for those that are frequent flyers, I didn't necessarily collect those that have the ability to fly, but those that I thought would be able to leap from a giant height onto their prey. Of course, I did include some animals on this side. There is a vulture and a beetle. But there are others that have wings too. I concluded this diorama by creating a Valley of the Giants. And within that Valley of the Giants, I collected a mythical Wendigo from the Norse mythology, some frost giants. And from the X-Men, I collected the Sentinels. And they're all being led by a crazy ginger. And I wish you would trust me on this one. All gingers are crazy. I should know. I am one. Okay, we're going to do a big, huge confession time here. Why not? It's the end of the video. When I started all of this, I had no idea that there were even action figures being manufactured that look more like the comic characters I saw in the 70s than they actually do like Bat-Toys. Of course, because I had no idea about action figures, I had no idea that there was dioramas that were set up so that you can actually make displays of them. Another thing I discovered is that there is a huge YouTube community out there that is filled with people who are committed and dedicated to the love of this hobby. Another thing that I discovered through this whole process was there's actually a Marvel comic artist that paints rather than uses the conventional inks for his Marvel characters. Finally, one thing that I was able to discover going through all of this was the ability to actually make videos and capture them on my iPhone and then post them on the internet. 2.5 years ago, I'd be making a film about a gym right now. But you see, Marvel Comics, ever since the 70s, they've given me this imagination. It was through this imagination I was able to create all of this. A room where I can disappear to from reality, just the way I think Marvel would want it.